I think we need to be bilingual in terms of, I see the tension between the top down and the bottom up, and so there are two perspectives at work. In one village, just last week, we were very excited about kind of launching. I mean, there would be probably 4, maximum 5 people, but they're all excited and they don't come to church, a new community. But on the day of the launch, I found myself having a conversation with members of the local PCC who were reasonably horrified about what was about to happen, and realized that even in the time of preparation, we just hadn't quite communicated properly and well what was about to happen. And so we paused everything, and we're going to go again in a few months' time and take everybody with us. But I was walking through the forest nearby, or woodland where I live, and saw there was if you look from the top down, if you're a bird and you look down, you just see this canopy of trees, and they're all almost overlapping. It looks really dense, and you look down and say, that's a seriously dense woodland. But when you're walking through it, you just see all of these trunks that look pretty similar, and space between them. And in that space between them, there's all of these wild flowers growing, there's ground cover, there's all sorts of stuff going on, and dandelions, and a whole load of stuff happening. And so if you're on the ground and it's bottom up, you're kind of like, there's space for this. These are people who don't get on with what's going on, and there's space for a midweek community, there's space for people to meet in the local pub, there's space for this to happen. If you're on the top down, you tend to think, we're already quite saturated, there's a lot going on. Isn't it enough that we have all of these buildings? We're just keeping the show on the road. And so I find trying to broker those relationships and being in the middle of those situations and sowing in peace and listening and understanding from the top down, often the fears or misunderstanding, and from the bottom up, nurturing that enthusiasm. I see relationship being key for what God's doing, certainly in Norfolk. We just say relationship. The way, if you aren't running so much an event-based church or event-based ministry, it's character, formational, everyday faith and life, then really the way people are going to come to faith or come to your community is through relationship. And practicing, planting in the way that we want to continue is really important, not separating out kind of what the theology and practice in a way that if we sow in peace, then we will reap in righteousness. And so there's honoring a lot of what's happened and is happening before, and we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. These are very underwhelming, small, fragile, little shoots of enthusiasm. And the inherited church is a big, strong gravitational pull, and it's persisted through storm after storm after storm. So we need to come in humility, and also it's God's ecology. It's His parish, it's His land, it's His earth, and we get to participate in His divine nature. Yeah.
One of the parables that resonates with the pioneer work that's going on is the mustard seed parable, where Jesus compares His own ministry to this weed. Essentially, is what mustard seed was, and a difficult weed to get rid of, apparently, but. People look at it and they're like, what is this thing growing in the garden? But actually, the whole climax of that parable is that Jesus says, this is going to become the Messianic kingdom. I think it's clinging to those stories, I think, that helps pioneers and communities to resonate from that. And I think the whole issue of racial diversity in the church is hugely key, but it's also a challenge about how we empower those leaders to create communities that are contextual for them, and give them leeway to do that.
Have you guys had experience of overcoming or working through maybe some of the conflict, might be too strong a term, but maybe some of the different perspectives that go on in your context? One way of a group wanting to do church over here, a different group having some resistance to that. You've spoken a little bit about this already. How have you overcome some of those so that we genuinely have mutually flourishing, beneficial relationships?
I think from my point of view, I think, relationship is key there. It's that continually talking together. I think for us, understanding that our values are the same, but actually our vehicles, the way we do things are very, very different. And I think one of the blessings is that St Barnabas has allowed us to do church that is contextually right for the estate, and it didn't want us to transfer its ways of doing things. That has been hugely mutually beneficial to St Barnabas, because it's almost like we are trialing things on the edges that then they're able to bring into the centre. But that means that still brings life into the sending church, which is good.
Yeah, I guess for us, where we've got the network parish churches, when we've initially had the early conversations about would you like to be part of the Fountains network, there has sometimes been some resistance to that. So in one of the parish churches, they were absolutely delighted. In the other, when we initially kind of went and had the discussion, it's like, don't you dare bring a guitar into our building, kind of thing. And I think there was this kind of assumption that what we were going to do, it was going to be a takeover. And that wasn't what we wanted to do at all. Essentially, what we wanted to do was to bring some strength in. And again, just like everybody else has said, it's then about the relationship. So going back to the PCC and having conversations with them, also inviting them down into Fountains, because what they thought Fountains was not really what Fountains was. Remember, they came along to one kind of new wine celebration that we had, and as they arrived late, so I didn't have the chance to speak to them before I stood up and did the service. And then when it came to a ministry time, actually 3 of the guys just came forward and had been really touched by what God had done in them in that moment. So building the relationships, allowing experience to take its course. And then for us, we're working very carefully with both of those churches to say, what is it that you actually would like from our network? So how can we support you? What we're doing is giving in 2 completely different ways to those 2 different kind of scenarios. So it's giving and it's taking, isn't it?
We had a really exciting moment where, in a sense, a community new church was sort of born through a community meeting where they were talking about what to do with the local church, and it's a local church that's in a field, it doesn't have a toilet, and one of the members had contacted us just because she was a primary school teacher, she's quite young and had a toddler, her brothers had stopped coming to church and her husband didn't really get on with going to church, and so she thought, well, maybe we need to get a TV or something. But anyway, we had this big meeting and she gathered loads of people from the village together, and people who are for a TV or against a TV or whatever it was, everything in between. And we explored just actually the global church. I thought let's just step right back and look at what's going on around the whole world and put ourselves in context and see the different ways people meet and what's going on and where things are growing and where they're not and why and what, and then what is church, and then coming into just some core values. And one lady put her hand up. She was the organist of the local church, and she said, if we just met like this, because we're all talking to each other, wouldn't it be great? Why don't we do this? And we're in the cricket pavilion at that point. So we just carried on. And so it happens there in the cricket pavilion, but it was great that it was suggested, really, and people chat, learn, and enjoy that space.